I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't make a scene. I just looked at him, at his wedding, and said one sentence that made the room go silent. This story takes place in the United States, in a life I never imagined would shatter so cleanly, and so publicly. My name is Alina Brooks. For 12 years, I was married to Daniel Brooks, a man everyone thought was perfect, successful, charming, the kind of man who smiled at waiters, donated to charity events, and spoke about family values at neighborhood barbecue, the kind of man women trusted, and men admired, and I trusted him too. Until I didn't. The divorce didn't happen overnight. It came slowly, quietly, like a crack in a wall that no one notices until the entire house collapses. Late nights that became normal, business trips that lasted longer than they should, a phone that never left his hand, always turned face down on the table. But I never checked his phone, not because I didn't suspect anything, but because I believed that if you have to spy on the person you love, the marriage is already dead. What I didn't know was that while I was trying to save our marriage, he was planning his exit. The day he asked for a divorce, he didn't look nervous. He looked relieved. "I'm not happy anymore," he said, sitting across from me at our kitchen table in suburban Ohio, the same table where we had celebrated promotions, birthdays, and one painful miscarriage we never talked about again. "Think we both deserve a fresh start." A fresh start, that was his phrase. He didn't mention her, but I found out anyway. 3 weeks later, a mutual friend accidentally tagged him in a photo at a wine bar in Chicago. His arm was around a woman I'd never seen before, young, glowing, wearing the confidence of someone who believed she'd won. Her name was Madison. She was his colleague, his business partner, the woman he told me not to worry about. And now she was the woman he left me for. The divorce was brutal but fast. Daniel wanted it that way. He offered money instead of apologies, silence instead of explanations. He kept the house, the social circle, and most of the assets, or at least, that's what he thought. What he forgot was the paperwork. During our marriage, I handled the finances, not because he asked me to, but because he didn't care enough to learn. Credit cards, joint accounts, automatic payments, subscriptions, business expense cards, everything ran through systems I set up years ago. And after the divorce was finalized, I did something very simple. I canceled every card that still had my authorization attached, every joint card, every backup card, every emergency card he forgot existed, legally, cleanly, quietly. I didn't block accounts out of spite. I didn't freeze assets illegally. I just removed my name from everything that was still tied to me. And then I walked away. Or so I thought. 6 months later, an ivory envelope arrived in my mailbox. Daniel Brooks and Madison, Halla request the pleasure of your company at their wedding ceremony. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was audacious. They were getting married at a luxury resort in California. Ocean view, 5-star catering, designer everything, the kind of wedding people take out loans to attend. And somehow, I was invited. At first, I planned to throw the invitation away. Then I saw the date, and I checked my calendar, and that's when I realized something that made my heart slow down. Instead of race, their wedding weekend was the same weekend all the annual renewals, travel cards, and vendor authorizations would be tested. Cards Daniel hadn't used personally in months. Cards Madison assumed were handled. Cards tied to systems no one but me truly understood. And in that moment, I didn't feel anger. I felt calm. Because for the first time since the divorce, the power wasn't loud, it was quiet. IRSVPD, yes. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Not my sister, not my friends, not even my therapist, the one person who knew how much damage Daniel had left behind. Because this wasn't about closure, and it definitely wasn't about forgiveness. It was about witnessing the truth with my own eyes. The wedding was being held in Monterey, California, at a coastal resort so expensive the valet parking alone cost more than my first apartment's rent. White stone pathways curved toward the ocean, lined with roses and eucalyptus branches. The air smelled like salt, champagne, and money. As I stepped out of my rental car, wearing a simple navy blue dress, nothing dramatic, nothing flashy, I noticed something immediately. Everything looked perfect, too perfect. The staff moved quickly, but not calmly. One coordinator whispered sharply into a headset. A caterer argued quietly with another, shaking his head while checking a clipboard. A young woman in a bridesmaid robe paced near the lobby, phone pressed to her ear, face pale. Something was already wrong. I checked in at the front desk under my own name, Ms. Brooks. The receptionist said politely, then paused. Her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before returning. Welcome. Your room is ready. She didn't say Mrs. She didn't say X-wife. Just Brooks. Good. I went upstairs, set my bag down, and stood by the window overlooking the ocean. Waves crashed against the rocks below, steady, relentless, patient. That's when my phone buzzed. A notification. Declined transaction corporate cardie. Stared at the screen. Heart steady. It had begun. I didn't touch anything. I didn't log into any accounts. I didn't need to. When I removed my authorization months ago, the system allowed a grace period, temporary overrides, manual approvals, bought weddings, especially luxury ones, stress test systems, large deposits, multiple vendors, same-day authorizations, and Daniel was careless. I freshened up, put on light makeup, and headed downstairs for the welcome reception. An informal gathering before the ceremony the next day. The moment I walked into the ballroom, conversation slowed, then stopped. Someone whispered my name. Daniel saw me from across the room. I watched his face change in real time. First, confusion, then disbelief, then panic, quick and sharp, like a needle. Madison was beside him, laughing at something someone said, hand resting possessively on his arm. She looked stunning, I'll give her that. Tall, blonde, effortlessly confident, the kind of woman magazines are built around. She noticed his tension and followed. His gaze, her smile froze. I didn't wave, I didn't smile. I simply walked past them and picked up a glass of sparkling water. Daniel approached me minutes later. Alone, Alina, he said quietly, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I didn't expect you, IRSVPD, I replied calmly. Didn't you see? Yes, I just thought, maybe you'd change your mind. Why would I? He swallowed. This might be uncomfortable. For who? I asked. He didn't answer. Before he could say anything else, Madison appeared at his side. Alina, she said brightly, extending her hand as if we were meeting for the first time. I'm so glad you could make it. Daniel's told me so much about you. I shook her hand. I'm sure he has, I said. Her smile tightened. An awkward silence settled between us. Thick, heavy. Then, a man in a black suit rushed up to Daniel, whispering urgently in his ear. Daniel's face drained of color. What do you mean declined? He hissed. Madison's eyes flicked between them. Declined what? Nothing. Daniel snapped too quickly. Just a minor issue. The man shook his head. Sir, the florist needs immediate authorization, or they're pulling the arrangements, and the rehearsal dinner deposit hasn't cleared either. Madison frowned. Daniel, I'll handle it, he said sharply. He pulled out his phone. Stepping away, I watched him walk toward the exit, fingers flying across the screen. Jaw clenched. Madison turned to me, lowering her voice. Is this about you? I met her gaze. Why would it be? She hesitated. Because ever since you arrived, things seemed off. I took a sip of my drink. Weddings are stressful, I said. I'm sure it's nothing. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Across the room, I could see Daniel arguing with the event coordinator, his voice rising despite his attempt to stay calm. Another buzz from my phone. Declined. Venue security holdie didn't smile. Not yet. That night, as guests drifted away and the tension thickened, Daniel cornered me near the elevators. What did you do? He demanded in a low voice. I echoed. You know exactly what I mean. Cards are declining. Accounts are frozen. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who once promised to grow old with me. Now sweating in a tailored tuxedo. I didn't freeze anything, I said calmly. I just stopped paying for things that weren't mine. His face hardened. This is my wedding. Yes, I agreed. It is. And you came here to sabotage it. I leaned closer, voice steady. No, Daniel, I came because you invited me. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside, and because, I added softly, everything happening right now is completely legal. The doors closed, leaving him standing there, furious, afraid, and finally realizing something he should have understood long ago. I was never powerless. I slept better that night than I had in years. That surprised me. No nightmares, no racing thoughts, just the sound of the ocean outside my window, and a calm that felt unfamiliar, almost foreign, but deeply earned. When I woke up, sunlight poured through the curtains, painting the room in soft gold. Somewhere below, staff were already moving furniture, arranging flowers, rehearsing perfection. It was the wedding day. I checked my phone before getting out of bed. 5 missed calls, 3 voicemails, all from Daniel. I didn't listen to them. Instead, I ordered room service coffee, toast, fruit, and took my time getting dressed. I chose a pale gray dress, understated, elegant, intentional. I wasn't there to compete with the bride. I was there to observe. As I stepped into the hallway, I could hear raised voices echoing from a suite down the corridor. A woman sobbing, a man arguing, someone else saying, "We can't fix this unless the payment clears." I smiled to myself by the time I reached the lobby. Chaos had replaced yesterday's tension. 2 delivery trucks sat idling near the entrance. Florists stood with arms crossed, refusing to unload. A security supervisor paced near the front desk, phone pressed tightly to his ear, and Madison, she was crying. Not discreetly, not gracefully. Full, shaking sobs as 2 bridesmaids tried desperately to calm her down. "Why is this happening?" she kept asking. Daniel said everything was taken care of. Daniel stood a few feet away, jacket off, tie loosened, hair no longer perfect. He looked like a man drowning in front of an audience that had paid to watch him swim. I walked past without stopping. He noticed me anyway. "Alina," he said sharply, breaking away from the coordinator mid-sentence. "We need to talk. Now." I turned slowly. "About what?" "You know damn well about what," he snapped. "This isn't funny anymore." I kept my voice low, calm. "I never said it was funny." Madison stormed over, mascara streaked, eyes blazing. "Did you do this?" she demanded. I studied her face. The panic, the disbelief, the sudden understanding that fairy tales don't come with receipts. "Do what?" I asked gently. "Our cards are being declined. Vendors are threatening to leave. The venue says they can't proceed without confirmation. And suddenly you show up." Her voice cracked. "This can't be a coincidence." Daniel grabbed her arm. "Madison, not here." She shook him off. "No, I want the truth." I looked at Daniel, then back at her. "The truth," I said slowly, "is that, after the divorce, I removed myself from every account that was legally tied to me." Daniel's eyes widened. "You said you were done." "I am done," I replied, "being responsible for your spending." Madison stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means," I continued, "that if you assumed certain cards would always work, that assumption wasn't based on reality." Her mouth opened, closed. "You told me everything was separate," she whispered to him. "You said your ex was completely out of the picture." "I am out of the picture," I said. "I didn't stop anything today. I stopped it months ago." A wedding planner approached nervously. "Sir, we need a decision. Without payment authorization, the ceremony cannot proceed on the beach." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "Give me 10 minutes. "We've already given you 30, she said apologetically. Guests began gathering nearby, whispers spreading like wildfire. "This is insane," Madison hissed. "Fix it." Daniel pulled me aside, lowering his voice to a desperate whisper. "You can fix this." I raised an eyebrow. "Can I?" "You still have access," he said. "You always set these things up. Just reauthorize for today. Please, please." The word landed heavier than any insult he'd ever thrown at me. "You want me," I said slowly, "to pay for your wedding, to the woman you cheated on me with." "It's temporary," he insisted. "I'll transfer it back. This is just a technical issue." I met his eyes. "You didn't think it was temporary when you left," I said quietly. "You didn't think about transferring anything back then." Madison crossed her arms. "So this is revenge?" I shook my head. "No, revenge would be doing something illegal. This is just consequences." She laughed bitterly. "You planned this." "I planned my exit," I corrected her. "You planned the wedding." Daniel's voice broke. "Alina, please, people are watching." I glanced around the lobby, guests pretending not to listen. Phones subtly raised. Staff frozen in place. "Yes," I said, "they are." That's when the resort manager approached. "Mr. Brooks," he said politely but firmly, "unless payment is secured within the next 15 minutes, we'll need to release the venue and staff." Madison's face went white. "This can't be happening," she whispered. Daniel looked at me, not with anger now, but fear. "I just need one favor," he said. I took a step back. "You already took 12 years," I said softly. "I'm not giving you one more minute." I turned and walked away. Behind me, Madison screamed his name, and somewhere deep inside, the final thread tying me to my old life snapped clean in two. By the time guests were asked to take their seats, The ocean breeze carried more than salt and sunlight. It carried confusion. White chairs lined the beach in perfect rows, ribbons fluttering gently, as if nothing in the world was wrong. The altar stood pristine, draped in silk, flowers arranged in soft pastels, a dream designed to be photographed from every angle. But behind the scenes, the dream was bleeding. I sat in the third row. Not the front, not hidden in the back, close enough to see everything, but far enough to remain untouchable. People whispered when they noticed me. Some recognized me immediately. Others leaned toward their neighbors, asking quiet questions. A few guests pulled out their phones, pretending to check messages, while clearly recording. Daniel stood near the altar, with his groomsmen, jaw-tight eyes scanning the crowd. When he saw me, his shoulders dropped just a fraction, not in relief, but resignation. Madison was nowhere in sight. Minutes passed, then more. The officiant cleared his throat, adjusting his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We'll be starting shortly." No one believed him. A bridesmaid hurried past, eyes red, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Another staff member whispered urgently into a headset, shaking his head again and again. The sun climbed higher, and still, no bride. Finally, Daniel's mother stood up. "Daniel," she called sharply, her voice cutting through the murmur. "What is going on?" He forced a smile. "Just a small delay, Mom." She narrowed her eyes, the same eyes that once looked at me like I wasn't good enough. "People flew across the country for this," she said loudly. "Don't embarrass us." I almost laughed. Madison appeared at last, storming down the pathway toward the altar, dress half bustled, veil missing. Her face was flushed with fury, not joy. She grabbed Daniel's arm. "They're pulling the catering," she hissed. "The musicians won't play. Security says they can't stay without confirmation. This wedding is falling apart." Daniel's voice was tight. "Lower your voice." "No," she snapped. "You fix this, right now." He glanced at me again. Everyone did. The silence was sudden, heavy, electric. I stood, not dramatically, not angrily, just calmly, like someone rising to speak at a meeting. The officiant stepped back instinctively. Daniel shook his head slightly. "Alina, don't." They took one step forward, and that's when Madison finally lost it. "You planned this," she screamed, turning toward the guests. "She planned all of this to humiliate us." Eyes turned to me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I just said one sentence. A sentence so simple, so devastatingly true. It sucked the air out of the entire beach. "I didn't cancel the cards today," I said evenly. "I canceled my responsibility to him months ago." Silence, not a whisper, not a breath. The ocean itself seemed to pause. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. Madison stared at him slowly, understanding dawning in real time. "You told me," she whispered. "Everything was paid for." Daniel said nothing. I continued, voice steady, carrying across the rows of white chairs. "I didn't stop this wedding," I said. "I just stopped paying for a marriage I wasn't in anymore." Someone gasped. Daniel's mother sat down hard. Madison turned on him, her voice breaking. "You lied to me." He reached for her. "I was going to fix it. When," she cried, "after we said our vows, after you embarrassed me in front of everyone." The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly. "Perhaps we should pause." Madison laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. "Pause. There is no wedding." She ripped the engagement ring from her finger and shoved it into Daniel's chest. "Not marrying a man who can't even pay for his own lies." A pet murmur rippled through the guests. Cameras were no longer hidden. Daniel stood frozen, ring in hand, exposed in a way no tailored suit could hide. I sat back down. My part was done. Security began quietly dismantling equipment. Vendors loaded boxes back into trucks. The musicians packed their instruments without ever playing a single note. The wedding dissolved in real time. As people stood to leave, whispers followed me. "Did you hear what she said? That was his ex." She didn't even raise her voice. Daniel approached me one last time, eyes hollow. "You humiliated me," he said. I met his gaze calmly. "No," I replied. "I introduced you." I walked past him, bare feet, sinking briefly into the sand, feeling lighter with every step. Behind me, the altar stood abandoned, a monument to assumptions and arrogance. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. By the time I returned home, the story had already grown legs. Not the truth, the version people preferred. According to social media, I was either a heartless villain who ruined a wedding out of spite, or a quiet hero who finally stood up to betrayal. Strangers argued about me in comment sections I never visited. Influencers stitched reaction videos to a moment they didn't understand. Headlines used words like savage, cold, iconic. None of them knew what happened after the beach. Empty. Because humiliation is loud, but consequences are quiet. 3 days after the failed wedding, I received an email from a law firm in Chicago. Subject: Notice of Financial Review. Daniel's company accounts were under internal audit. Not because of me, but because vendors had filed formal complaints, contracts had been broken, payments had failed, and when businesses smell instability, they don't ask questions politely, they investigate. Daniel called me that night. I let it ring, then again, and again. On the fourth call, I answered. What do you want? I asked. Not unkindly, just finished. They're auditing everything, he said, voice hoarse. My credit, the company cards, even the accounts that were supposedly clean. I said nothing. They think I misrepresented my financial standing, he continued. They're talking about breach of trust. You did misrepresent it, I replied calmly, just not to them first. There was a long silence. Then he asked the question I knew was coming. Why didn't you warn me? I closed my eyes. Because, I said, you never warned me when you replaced me. His breath hitched. Madison didn't call, but she emailed a long message, carefully worded, polite on the surface, sharp underneath. She accused me of manipulation, of staging a public collapse, of pretending innocence while pulling strings behind the scenes. I read it once. Then, I deleted it. Because here's the truth no one likes to admit. If your entire future collapses because one person stopped supporting you, you were never standing on your own. 2 weeks later, the legal fallout began. Daniel's company placed him on temporary leave. That's corporate language for, we're distancing ourselves from you while we decide how expensive this will be. His friends stopped calling. Not dramatically, not angrily, they just disappeared. Dinner invitations dried up. Group chats went silent. People who once praised his ambition suddenly remembered other plans. Because success attracts loyalty. Failure exposes transactions. One afternoon, I ran into Daniel's sister at the grocery store. She looked exhausted. He's not doing well, she said quietly. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, and I meant it, just not enough to intervene. She hesitated. He says you ruined his life. I met her eyes. No, I said gently. I stopped protecting it. That same week, something unexpected happened. I received a call from my old bank, the one Daniel insisted we switch away from years ago. Because he wanted streamlined control, they offered me a financial advisory position. Turns out, when someone handles complex systems quietly and competently for over a decade, people notice, especially when those systems survive chaos without breaking. Accepted. Not out of revenge. Out of alignment. My life didn't explode upward overnight, it stabilized. I slept through the night. I stopped checking my phone obsessively. I ate meals without anxiety sitting beside me. One evening, while organizing old documents, I found our original marriage certificate. I stared at it for a long time. Then I shredded it. Not angrily, not CEREMONIOUSLY, just thoroughly. Daniel tried once more to see me in person. He waited outside my building. Almost didn't go down, but curiosity won. He looked older, smaller, not physically, energetically. I never meant to hurt you, he said. I know, I replied. You just didn't care if you did. He flinched. I thought I could start over, he said. You did, I answered. You just didn't like the price. He nodded slowly, finally understanding something that had taken me years to learn. Power doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't need witnesses. Power simply stops participating. As he walked away, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph. Not pity. Relief. Because the sentence I spoke at that wedding wasn't just for him, it was for me. And in that moment, I knew something with absolute certainty. My future would never again be funded by my silence. Time does something strange after public chaos. It stretches. Days feel longer, quieter, almost suspiciously peaceful, like the calm after a storm, when you're still waiting to hear thunder again. I kept expecting something else to break. Another call, another accusation, another version of the story designed to make me the villain, but it didn't come. What came instead was space, to notice how much of myself I had been carrying like extra weight for years. The way I used to apologize for being organized, for asking questions, for wanting clarity. Daniel used to call it control. Friends called it supportive. I now knew it for what it was. Unpaid labor, invisible labor, the kind that only matters once it's gone. At my new job, no one asked me to just handle it. They asked for my opinion and waited for the answer. My days were filled with numbers, systems, projections, clean problems with clean solutions. And every evening, I went home to silence that didn't feel lonely. One afternoon, a woman stopped me in the parking garage. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly. "You don't know me, but I was at that wedding." I tensed instinctively. She smiled gently. "I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For not screaming," she said. "For not breaking down. For showing me it's possible to leave with dignity." Her words stayed with me longer than the internet ever could. Dignity doesn't trend, it lingers. Daniel tried to rebuild his reputation. LinkedIn posts about resilience, vague quotes about growth through adversity, photos cropped carefully to avoid loneliness. People liked them, but they didn't trust them, because when someone's downfall is public, their recovery requires truth, not branding. Madison disappeared entirely. No wedding photos, no honeymoon posts, no announcements. I heard later she moved back east, took a job far outside the lifestyle she'd envisioned. That's not a punishment, that's reality adjusting. One evening, months later, I attended a small financial conference in Denver. Nothing glamorous, no influencers, just professionals exchanging ideas over lukewarm coffee. During a panel discussion, someone asked about risk mitigation in personal finance. I raised my hand, and for the first time, I told my story, without names, without drama. Just facts, about shared systems, about assumed dependencies, about the danger of building your life on someone else's access. The room went quiet. Not because it was shocking, because it was familiar. Afterward, 3 women approached me. Each one had a version of the same sentence. I thought I was crazy for worrying about this. "You're not crazy," I told them, "you're just paying attention." That night, back in my hotel room, I realized something profound. The sentence I spoke at that wedding had traveled farther than the beach. Had echoed into rooms I'd never enter, into marriages I'd never see, into decisions that would quietly save people from years of regret. Daniel emailed me once, more. Short, controlled, defensive. "I hope you're happy." I stared at the words for a long time. Then I replied, with honesty, not cruelty, "I am peaceful. And that's better." He never responded. I didn't need him to, because closure doesn't come from agreement, it comes from clarity. The story people tell about you will never be fully yours, but the life you build afterward, that belongs to you alone. The strangest part about rebuilding your life isn't learning how to stand again. It's realizing how long you were standing crooked just to accommodate someone else. For the first time in years, my calendar belonged to me. No shared obligations. No, "Can you just handle this?" messages. No last-minute emergencies that were never actually emergencies. Just someone else's lack of preparation. I moved apartments. Not far. Not dramatically. Just enough to make the space feel like a declaration. Smaller, brighter, with windows that faced east. So, the mornings arrived gently. Instead of demanding attention, I bought furniture that made sense, instead of furniture that impressed guests we rarely liked. And slowly, quietly, I began to recognize myself again. One evening, my sister came over for dinner. She watched me move around the kitchen, unhurried, confident, and finally said what she'd been holding back. "You're different." "I know," I said. "No." She smiled softly. "You're lighter." That was the word. Lighter. Not because life had become easier, but because I wasn't dragging someone else's weight behind me anymore. Around that time, an unexpected opportunity came up. A former colleague invited me to consult on a regional project, temporary, flexible, high impact, 6 months, no long-term commitment, no expectations beyond results. Old me would have asked permission. New me said yes. The project took me across 3 states. I stayed in small hotels, ate alone, without feeling awkward, and rediscovered the pleasure of quiet mornings in unfamiliar cities. In Kansas City, I sat in a cafe watching strangers pass by and realized something that stopped me mid-sip. No one here knows who I used to be. not as someone's wife, not as someone's support system, just me. That anonymity felt like freedom. One night, scrolling idly through my phone, I saw a photo from the wedding pop up again, reposted by a gossip page with a caption dripping in drama. I didn't feel anger. I felt distance. The story belonged to the internet now, stripped of nuance, repackaged for entertainment, and that was okay, because the real transformation didn't make headlines. It happened in quiet decisions. Choosing rest over explanation, choosing clarity over kindness that costs too much, choosing myself without apology. Neil stopped appearing in my thoughts entirely, not because I forced him out, but because he no longer fit into the life I was building. How healing works, not with fireworks, but with replacement. New routines replace old anxieties, new goals replace old compromises, new peace replaces old patterns. One afternoon, while reviewing a contract, I caught my reflection in the office glass. I looked grounded, not hardened, not bitter, grounded, and I smiled. Because the woman staring back at me wasn't defined by what she survived. She was defined by what she refused to carry forward. Asterisk. Power is often misunderstood. People think it's loud, public wins, dramatic exits, viral moments that force the world to clap or gasp. For a while, even I believed that. I thought the wedding was the peak, the moment everything turned. But that wasn't real power. That was visibility. Real power arrived later, quietly, when no one was watching. It arrived the day I stopped explaining myself at work. A senior executive once asked me why I'd left my previous position so abruptly years ago. The old version of me would have softened the truth, wrapped it in diplomacy, taken responsibility for someone else's chaos. This time, I said simply, because the structure wasn't honest. He nodded, no follow-up, no suspicion, just acceptance. That was new. I began to notice how often women are taught to translate reality so others don't feel uncomfortable. How often we're encouraged to cushion facts, to absorb fallout, to act as shock absorbers in systems that benefit from our silence. I stopped doing that. Not aggressively, not performatively. I just stopped volunteering myself as collateral. Around this time, I received an invitation to speak at a financial ethics symposium in Washington, D.C., a small audience, closed doors, policy level conversations, the kind of room where decisions echo outward, quietly. I spoke about accountability, not emotional accountability, structural accountability, about how shared systems fail when one person assumes the other will always clean up the mess, about how trust is often used as a substitute for transparency, about how the most dangerous phrase in any partnership is, "Don't worry, I've got it." After the session, an older man approached me. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I've been in finance for 30 years. The people who cause the most damage are never the loud ones. They're the ones everyone assumes are being taken care of." That sentence stayed with me. Because Daniel wasn't reckless in obvious ways, he was reckless in private. He relied on invisibility, on my competence, on my silence, and when that disappeared, everything else followed. One night, months later, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Daniel, not asking for help, not blaming. Just one sentence. "I didn't know who I was without you handling everything." I stared at the screen, then one typed and erased several replies. Finally, I sent the only honest one. That was never my job. He never wrote back. And that was fine, because sometimes understanding arrives too late to repair damage, but just in time to prevent repetition. I looked around my apartment that evening. The quiet wasn't empty anymore, it was intentional. I had built a life where nothing depended on my silence, my sacrifice, or my exhaustion. A life where partnership, if it ever came again, would be a choice, not a responsibility. And in that realization, I understood the deepest truth of all. The most powerful move I ever made wasn't canceling the cards, it was canceling the belief that love requires self-erasure. The last thing people asked me about wasn't the wedding, it wasn't the cards, it wasn't the sentence, it was this: "Do you regret it?" The question usually came quietly, late in conversations, when curiosity dropped its performance and showed its real face. People wanted to know if I felt guilty, if I wished I'd been kinder, if I would have done anything differently now that the dust had settled. And every time, my answer surprised them. "No," I said, "but not for the reason you think. I don't regret standing up for myself. That part is obvious. What I don't regret is what I kept. I kept my composure when chaos tried to pull me under. I kept my dignity when humiliation would have been easier. I kept my voice calm when anger would have made me relatable and disposable. Most importantly, I kept my future intact. In the months that followed, my life didn't turn into a movie montage. There were no dramatic promotions or sudden romances, no poetic justice moments designed for applause. There was something better. Consistency. I built routines that didn't revolve around anyone else's emergencies. I created boundaries that didn't require explanation. I learned the difference between being needed and being valued and stopped confusing the two. One evening, while organizing old files, I found a handwritten note Daniel had once left me early in our marriage. "I don't know how I'd manage without you." At the time, I thought it was love. Now I understood it was dependency. And dependency, dressed up as romance, is still a cage. I shredded the note, not angrily, just thoroughly. I began mentoring younger women at work, not formally, not loudly, just showing them systems, explaining why clarity matters, teaching them to ask one question that can change everything. What happens if I stop? If the answer is everything falls apart, you're not in a partnership, you're in a trap. The final lesson didn't come from Daniel. It came from myself. From realizing that the strongest thing I ever did wasn't exposing him, it was withdrawing my support without apology, because strength doesn't announce itself, it simply leaves. Today, my life is quiet, in the best way. No chaos, no emergencies, no roles I didn't agree to play. And when I think back to that beach, to the moment all eyes turned toward me, I don't remember the faces, I remember the feeling. Steady, certain, free. That's what I kept. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever carried someone else's world on your back, subscribe for stories about strength, self-respect, and quiet power. And comment below, what would you stop paying for if you chose yourself today? Because sometimes, the most powerful sentence is the one where you finally say, "I'm done."